Hello and welcome back. Now in this section, I want to put together all the different things we've learned throughout this training because we've covered quite a few different topics, right? We've been talking about microphone placement and camera placement and speaker zones and presenter zones and VisionSuite Designer and a bit of programming. But here I thought we should just look at an example request, let's say from a customer for a more complex space, and talk not so much about how we're going to implement it, but what we actually need to do, why we need to do it to achieve the right kind of outcomes. So the room looks fairly straightforward, but a bit bigger, a little bit more complex than what we've seen with our boardroom example, okay? Now, in this case, let's talk firstly about the microphones. So for example, here you could have two microphones and just looking at it, that looks like it'd be totally fine. But don't forget to check the distances, all right? So remember, we've said about 3 meters is perfect for direction of arrival data from the microphones. You can go a bit further, but if you go beyond, say, 5 meters, you're going to find that that quality really starts to go down a little bit. So here we could just draw two circles on the drawing. This is a 3 meter radius and a 5 meter radius here. And you can see everybody's within 5 meters and quite a lot of people are a lot closer than that. But don't forget, if this is a high ceiling, you really need to take that into account. So, if you're just looking down, you don't really understand the distance that people are vertically from the microphone, which of course is just as relevant as their sort of horizontal distance, which is just what I'm showing here. So don't forget to check that. Now, here's the thing. This room is actually a multi-purpose space with multiple different furniture layouts. In fact, you can see here, this looks like those kind of flexible tables that they might be moving around. So turns out they've got another room mode, which looks a little bit like more of a presentation space. Now, remember, we've said a few times that we can have multiple configs in VisionSuite Designer. Now, that is where this is going to come into play, when we've got the same room with the same hardware, but we want it to work differently. Now, in VisionSuite Designer, you can just basically duplicate a config and then start to change things. And different configs can have different furniture layouts, which is where that 3D furniture moving around really comes into play. But also we can have different speaker zones in different locations, same thing for presenter zones. And actually all of the rules can be completely different as well. All right, so the same hardware used in a different way. Now, let's look here. Does this microphone coverage still work in this case? Well, on paper, yes, it totally does. But remember, we would rather not be picking up the back of people's heads. So here, everybody's facing this way. This is where the presenter's going to be. And for example, these people, you're still going to hear them, but you're going to sort of hear them from the back of their head, which isn't great for sound quality or for actual data quality either. So we could add in there perhaps a third microphone just to really cover that. And now remember, it's a presentation space, so we actually want that just for the presenter as well. So there we go. Now we've got even better microphone coverage. Let's talk a little bit about the cameras, okay? Now here we've put in a presenter camera, right? Very typical at the back of the room to cover the stage. And we've also got our conductor camera, which we said isn't totally compulsory, but is going to give you better quality, better outcomes for speaker spotlight. Let's just have a little look at that here. So we can put the field of view. Now this is an NC90, so this is a 90-degree field of view. And I know that because when I drew this triangle in PowerPoint, held down the Shift key, there you go, 90-degree triangle. See, it's not just about VisionSuite here. Office techniques also taught on this training course. And we can see that this does cover pretty much everybody, but there's a couple of people here who are just out of the view. But remember, the conductor camera, it's still going to give us better outcomes for all of the people who are inside it. We could make this wider, right? We could go to an NC110, but remember the NC110, because it's so wide, 110-degree field of view, that you actually can't see as far because people far away are just really, really tiny. So the NC90 is really a great spot for conductor cameras. It's got a really quite a wide field of view, but it can still see far enough for a lot of these kind of rooms. So that's all good. Now let's have a little look at the number of people, because we also mentioned, didn't we, that we've got a total limit of computer vision detections of about 30 people. And actually, just here in the audience, we've got more than 30 people being picked up by that conductor camera. So this is really easy to change, right? We can throw in some exclusion zones to just remove some people. For example, we could, from the conductor's point of view, exclude, let's say, the back row, but also the actual presenter area. If you're the conductor camera, all you're going to see of the presenters here is the back of their heads. It's not particularly useful information. So with a conductor camera facing the audience, it's always a good idea to think about excluding the presentation area, which would really be the sort of bottommost part of that field of view from the front of the room there. Very, very good. Now, let's also talk about the other cameras and how they're going to pick up the audience. So we've got here this speaker spotlight area. We could actually just keep it real simple, right? We could have a speaker spotlight zone maybe for the stage so that we could switch to the presenter camera. Even if there's no tracking happening, you could say somebody speaking here, we'll switch to that camera. And then over here, we could have for the audience area, a big speaker spotlight zone as well. We've talked about this a bunch of times. A big zone just works really, really nicely for a lot of different systems. And here we've got a primary and secondary camera. We could put these together. Actually, we're going to see that having them apart in this case is going to be useful for reasons that will become clear. All right, so there we go. That's a nice kind of fairly straightforward setup. But the client's got a little bit of a surprise for us. They've actually got another room mode, another config. All right, what does it look like? It looks like this, okay? Big U-shaped table setup, but still they're going to have a presentation area here. So not just for presentations to an audience, actually more collaborative, working on things while being presented to with this kind of space. So we could take the same approach, right? We could totally just have another big zone here, and we could have presenter zone there, no problem, right? But there is a little bit of a nuance here, because if we say either of these two speaker spotlight cameras can pick up anybody in this big orange zone here, then you're going to find that in some cases they're going to pick up, let's say, this person and see the back of their head, or they're going to go to this person and see the back of this person's head, or for example, same thing over here. All right, so instead, a bit like that boardroom demo we saw earlier where we split the room in half, this would actually be a good example where we have a left and a right speaker zone, and then we kind of have the cameras shooting across the room. So here, this camera would cover all of these people, this camera would cover all of these people, and still the same thing with the presenter camera covering the presentation area. Now let's go back to that first room and see how this extra hardware we've added plays out and how we can use it in the first config. So coming back to here, we've now got the 3 mics, no problem having a third mic, it's just going to give us extra coverage for people in the middle over there. We've got these cameras which could obviously cover this side of the table. We've got that camera which could cover this side of the table. We've got the conductor camera. Now this camera here covering this side of the table, well, now I'm talking about speaker spotlight. But I just said that we were using this as a presenter tracking camera in the other config. Now, that's actually totally fine. You can change a camera's role between conductor camera, speaker spotlight, and presenter spotlight in each individual config. And when you change config, that camera just gets used in a different way. So it is not a problem to say here it's speaker spotlight, but earlier it was presenter tracking. But this isn't going to be equivalent. If you're sitting on this side of the table, you're going to have this camera moving between shots, whereas on this side of the table, you're going to have a nice kind of primary, secondary camera setup. So you could take this a bit further. You could make the room more kind of symmetrical. You could actually have a camera here and a camera here to kind of mirror the camera here and the camera there. We can check the conductor camera's field of view again. Again, we can see people on the extreme are kind of just out of view there, but don't forget that having the conductor camera cover all these people is going to give a more accurate experience in the vast majority of shots. And these people are still well within range of the mic. We're not going to have any issue there with those people being picked up. So I think this is still fine. So let's talk about our speaker zones. And because we've got this extra camera here, we might be tempted to do something a little bit clever, right? We could say, hey, let's have one big speaker zone for this side of the table, primary, secondary cameras covering that over there. But here we've got 3 cameras. So why don't we cut it up into thirds, right? We could have this camera just shooting straight ahead, this camera shooting over here, this camera shooting over here. We could totally do that. And that wouldn't be a problem, but remember, one of the big benefits of VisionSuite is that you don't need to be so prescriptive about what people are picked up by what camera, unless it's something that's really gonna be of benefit. For example, you don't want to be seeing the back of people's heads. But here, any of these three cameras could pick up any of the people on this side, and it would always be a nice shot. So even though you could do this, I would just go simple, right? Just do the same thing. Have a big zone here, a big zone here, primary, secondary cameras on this side. And here you've got primary, secondary. You can actually have tertiary, I guess you'd call it, cameras as well. You can have 3 cameras in a roll. So very good. We've managed to design a room with 3 different configs and come up with hardware and configurations that cover every eventuality. And it didn't really take very long. So I think you're all pretty much kitted out now to design your VisionSuite systems. We're obviously going to have an assessment after this video, and I'm also going to link you to a Designing to VisionSuite guide document, which contains a lot of the tips and tricks we've talked about throughout this training, and I'm going to need you to take a look at it because we're actually going to test you on that in the exam. So good luck.